Now, I say don't become a cynic, but I'm going to urge you to become a skeptic. I'm a person who serves in government. You've given me a certain amount of sovereign power. For a democracy to survive and for you to be good citizens, you've got to be skeptical about me. I'm human. I'm fallible. I'm subject to mistakes. So your obligation in this democracy is always to question people who are in power. But it's not an undisciplined skepticism. I'm reminded of a time back in 1880 when Matthew Arnold, who was a British poet and social critic, he was touring the United States and he was very critical about the American cousins. He said, you know, they don't have the proper sense of awe, especially for their betters. And then he criticized particularly the role of the funny man in Minnesota or in American society. And he had a particular target in mind. He was a journalist, a social critic. You'll all recognize his name, Samuel Clemens, Mark Twain. And Mark Twain was very stung by that criticism because, after all, he liked the British. He wrote the Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. And he wrote a sentence that didn't get published during his lifetime that defines what you should do and what the role of an American citizen is. He said, a discriminating irreverence is the creator and protector of liberty. Think about that. A discriminating irreverence. Two key words. It's all right to be irreverent, but be discriminating. Be intelligent. Be smart in your criticism. And be positive and productive. And then you will guarantee that our country is going to be strong. Because the two things that I see is that just really are our advantage in this world. And I finished a lecture tour in China a couple years ago. I just did a diplomatic mission to Manila, or the Philippines, as part of their election process. And I came back with a conclusion that we have two major advantages. One is the education system that we have, that you're a part of. And the other is that our freedoms. I know you have, I see a Chinese flag there, and you have a fellow student from China. I lectured in China, I lectured in many of the top schools. I lectured in English, mind you. The room was just eclectic, and they asked me all kinds of interesting questions. So there's a tremendous global challenge that we face as American citizens. But I came back knowing that we have some advantages. It's our educational system and our freedom. See, we don't have to think in silos. We don't have to be careful who we communicate with. We don't have to be careful who we smile at when we make a statement about life in our society. We have free communication, and that's our advantage. And so as a justice and someone who is concerned about the laws, I urge you to be very protective of the freedoms that so many people have fought hard for and done so many brave acts to preserve. After this post-9/11 era, too many people, I think, are too willing to give up on what is so fundamental that preserves the opportunities that I talked about earlier. And always remember, our Constitution is basically a contract, and it's a limited contract. Every one of you is a party to that contract. And it is a limited contract that you have, as citizens, reserve certain rights and freedoms to yourself, and don't ever compromise with respect to those rights. Don't trade them for some vague notion of security, because then you're going to trade the future, your future, and the future of your children away. Now, a couple of other things that I got a little preachy there, but it's something I really believe in. But I'm going to talk about a couple of other things just briefly. One of the keys to my life is I'm not afraid to have heroes. I've always looked for role models. Now, it's dangerous to have heroes. Anybody who supported John Edwards for president or was a big fan of Tiger Woods in the golf arena knows that heroes often have clay feet. But I tell you, it's worth the investment. Because you want to have heroes, you want to have role models, you want to have mentors, because they will point the way for you. You know, our Supreme Court recently decided a very big case dealing with unallotment. One of my heroes is my political science professor at Macalester College. In deciding that case, I was dealing with issues that he taught me in Political Science 101 and state and local government. It's like Dr. Mito was at my side as I was sorting through these issues. He's a hero of mine. He's a mentor. And the other thing that I want to point out to you is that when you look for mentors, they'll help you out. But you got to be getting a degree here tonight, and that degree is going to put you in a role where you can be a mentor. And see, this is how it works with mentoring. You can reach up to look for the help of a mentor, and at the same time as you're doing that, make sure you reach back and mentor something. It could be a younger sibling, it could be a friend, it could be somebody who's struggling with an alcohol or drug abuse problem, but that's how life works. So look for mentors, look for heroes, even though there's risk involved, and then be one yourself, because that's what makes our society function so well. That talks about service. You know, you should look to be of service. You know, as a rising tide raises all boats, you should look the ways you can serve the greater society. Another one of my heroes and my mentors, former Governor Harold Evander, wore a ring. He said, "To succeed, serve." It was given to him by his father. And it's true. To succeed, if you want to succeed, look beyond yourself. I'm going to talk a little bit about my generation a little bit. It's about maybe being a little too selfish in some ways. But you need to serve and look for ways to serve in order to succeed. I'm going to wrap up in the next 5 minutes of talking about your generation. I love reading about Gen X, Gen Y, millenniums, and I look here, I said, I think we got some Gen Xers, we got some Gen Yers. Maybe we even have a few millenniums in this group. And they like to describe you. Is that sometimes they say you're selfish, you're entitled, you're collegial. I mean, all across the board. I'm one who has a lot of faith in the Gen Xers and the Gen Y and the millenniums. I think that our future of our country really rests on your shoulders. And I say that with a little bit of a heavy heart because I think my generation, the generation of I'm just a bit ahead of the baby boom. In some ways, we haven't left a terribly good table for you to deal with. Recent book out refers to the baby boomers as the grasshopper generation. You know what a grasshopper is? They're referring to them as a plague. They came through and devoured everything in their path and didn't leave anything behind them but a bunch of debt. I mean, that's maybe a little harsh, but I think that we've done some things to you that you should be a little bit resentful for. I graduated from law school in 1968. When I graduated, I had a 1965 Mustang paid for, a new suit of clothes, a used black and white TV, and no debt. That last one's a big one, isn't it? No debt. I see your generation coming out with 5-figure, 6-figure debt. Somehow we found it acceptable that we burden you with that type of debt in order to succeed in this society. That's despicable to my mind. And I think back at somebody thought I was worth the investment, that made it possible for me to work in the summertime, to work my way through law school, and finish up with no debt. The other thing we're doing to you, are you being feed to death around here? I mean, that's another way we transfer things. We don't call it tuition anymore. We don't call it taxes. It's just a fee. We got to change that. We got to change that. We got to make it better for the next generation. And one of the things I ask of you is, we maybe didn't set the table so well for you, but don't take it out on the generation that comes behind you. Make it better. Change it. Please change it. And then I'm going to talk now about, you say, how, Justice Anderson, how can you ask us to change it? These are some of the hardest economic times. They are the worst economic times I've seen in my 66 years. You know, it's maybe not as bad as the Great Depression of the 30s, probably as bad as the Panic of 1893. And so how can you ask us to succeed in these times? And I want to talk to you about the optimism of uncertainty. You should welcome uncertainty. You know, an optimistic person is a person who believes the future is uncertain, not preordained. That means you can have an effect on it. You can do something about it. It gives you a position where you can reject easy answers. You know, change is very much a part of our lives. And look at it this way. As you go through life, you can only see so far ahead of you. It's like driving a car at night. You can only see as far as the headlights.